The first round was an absolute battle for Levan's cup. Devon's pronation completely swallowed Levan's hand and wrist. He held Levan with hand control for a long time. Levan gave up his hand to flop press, as he was fighting a losing battle. He flopped press but fouled and the round was restarted. The remaining rounds were just pure domination from Levan. Devon was not able to stop him for a second. Levan just hit him straight to the pad. I doubt that the first round Levan was just acting and his body language was just as normal. No panic, no anxiety. Levan is unbeatable for now.
Devon sandbags. Levan knows this, and I think he's using the same tactic. Don't show them your hand, poker face. I've never seen Devon failing to get a slip. Devon grips low on his opponent's hand, even if he wants to play an outside move. He always advises to cover the thumb knuckle when top rolling. When he defends a powerful hit, his fingers immediately slip off his thumb. This results in two outcomes, one in the opponent's favor and the other in Devon's favor. It puts less pronation torque on the opponent's last chain, the fingers. But it also puts Devon's riser in a more efficient position. The low grip provides more finger stability to the rise through the index and middle fingers, and they start to attack the opponent's ring and pinky fingers in purely back pressure vector, in other words, direction. Covered thumb knuckle provides significant pronation pressure, but less riser pressure. As his opponent extends his arm to the max, his fingers become useless. As you can notice here, his fingers are floating in the air, while the torque is applied from the back of his extended wrist. The wrist extension thing, or the kickback, as Devon calls it, puts additional torque on his own ligament, the ulnar one. And that's basically the way he trains for the pronation lift. I bet he's the only arm wrestler who can lift 75 kilos with an extended wrist, as it puts nearly 15% more torque on the pronator muscles. The whole point of the lift is to keep the wrist a bit bent and not let the weight turn your palm up. A cup just defeats the purpose of the lift. The normal anatomy of the top roll is that the pronation strength transmits through the thumb and knuckle. So what are the benefits of putting the fingers around the opponent's hand circumference? Well, basically the index and middle fingers are important for pronation stabilization. The fingertips are conveying the pronation force on a wider part on the opponent hand, near the thumb pad. To get a more clear idea, just look at the multi-spinner. It's nearly impossible to engage pronation without containing the tool with your fingers. You can notice that Devon's fingers here are leaving a hollow space underneath them, making a 90 degrees angle with Devon's hand. This angle allows the pronation force to be applied at right angle, which is the most effective. It's different from fully containing the opponent's hand without leaving a space underneath. Gripping higher is the bread and butter of any top roller. You can much more easily open up an opponent's hand and fingers if you get a higher grip. Also, it is much more difficult to finish a king's mover who has long forearm arms because you basically can't get on top of his hand and finish the match by pushing down the hand is just out of reach. And you get either stuck side pressuring it or you completely give away your hand and wrist and get top rolled all the way over. So in short, while mechanically long bones make the levers weaker in arm wrestling, there are so many advantages to having long forearms, hands, and fingers that you always benefit from every single millimeter of length. High grip is for pronation, but low grip gives more preference to rise. When the stronger opponent hits, the other arm wrestler's fingers will immediately slip off the thumb. They will attack a thicker portion of the opponent's hand, which is a disadvantage for your pronation. In terms of riser, this grip not only gives better position for fingers to rise, but also gives them room to contain the other arm wrestler's wrist. I don't see Devon rising through the opponent's wrist with his own knuckle. It's from his index finger. A known physical rule is that the longer lever needs more force to move for a specific range of motion. Riser gives additional height to the already long arm of Devon, but he doesn't need to contract his muscles harder to compensate, because his riser and the rest of his arm act as separate entities. Multi-spinner is the best simulator for hand control. The deeper you wrap your fingers around it, the more pronation will be activated via containment. Finger containment can also attack the opponent's wrist flexion. You either activate pronation by cupping or by driving with side pressure. In both cases, it will be activated statically. The dynamic activation involves the rotation of the forearm from neutral to pronated position. The pronator teres is responsible for this specific range of motion. The pronation quadrats is responsible for bringing the forearm from supinated to neutral. Devon defends the hits with static pronation and attacks with the dynamic one. Static is combined with back pressure, and the dynamic false hope. The amount of flexibility Devon's wrist possesses allows him to get in compromised positions without getting injured. The most obvious is the wrist kick back. Getting your wrist bent back while maintaining pronation is the most painful and injury-susceptible move in arm wrestling. The most of the stress is applied on the ulnar ligament, which is relatively weaker in comparison to other joints. The Devon's pronation lift involves bending the wrist back, which breaks the wrist leverage advantage. This form of the lift makes it more difficult because it activates wrist flexion from a severely disadvantageous position. The kickback thing exposes the ulnar ligament so badly, and that's how Devon conditioned his wrist, not to mention the multi-spinner, which makes the wrist spin, the rotation of the hand with a fixed arm. It's also painful in arm wrestling matches. Devon attacks the arm of his opponent via positioning of his entire body in such a way that allows him to exert force without even moving his own hand. That technique involves leaning backward and downward in a squat position. He enters a king's move from the center, and it can also be considered as a defensive and offensive move at the same time. He uses this technique when he already knows that the other arm wrestler is stronger than him. This move forces the match to be about hand control. And I do think that no arm wrestler can hook him from this position, even Levan. Devon has done an unlimited amount of pronation work over the years, and that has led to permanent pronation of his arm, starting from neutral. Only Levan was able to supinate his arm in the last few years. That speaks volume of his strength. Even with the supinated arm, he can still pronate. Riser, as Devon explains it, allows to concentrate force in the most disadvantageous lane for the opponents. The philosophical explanation to this approach states that it is not necessarily putting your opponent in a bad position, but putting your own structure in a good position. When you rise, you're not actually attacking any part of the opponent's chain. Forget about two meats fighting each other. Think about it as if you're resisting a force that's trying to make your wrist tilt in an ulnar direction. In other words, your wrist is trying to resist being dumped down. I strongly believe that riser have no specific counter. If you want to fight a strong riser, you have to apply force in multiple directions. Before they met, Devon put up a different show when it comes to talking. After meeting Levan, he was probably reminded of what happened to him last time. That's why he's kind of quiet compared to his usual trash talk. You guys are forgetting that you almost never see Devon in a shirt. He's typically rocking his green hoodie pre-match, then for the match he's already pumped. He probably always looks like this. Erms proved that stopping Levan is at least possible, and Devon beating Erms opens the door for speculation. But the fact of the matter is, Levan is just plain stronger. You have to beat the refs and the opponent, it's just part of it. It's true in every sport, but arm wrestling especially. The way Devon stopped Levan not far off center and held him while not losing his wrist was the best indicator. Nobody has held Levan like that, and to do it while giving up over 100 pounds of body weight. The fact Devon mentioned using fouls to King's move was interesting. It only took one foul like that to beat Levan down, and that was a smaller version of himself. If you look at what Devon has done in the past year, it's almost impossible to think any human alive can pin him 6 times. If Levan can do that, he should retire after, because there's nothing left for him to accomplish in the sport of arm wrestling. Levan is closer to the shape he was in. Devon sandbags Levan knows this, and I think he's using the same tactic, don't show them your hand, poker face. I've never seen Devon failing to get a slip,